Hello, this is Saima Mohsin on this extra Sky News Daily, the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. You'll have seen the video by now. He stood at a lectern at a presidential rally.
Want to really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
He clutches his ear as the sound of shots ring out. Secret Service agents clambering on top of him to force him to take cover and then rush him off stage as he raises a fist in defiance.
Move! Move! Are we good? Shooters down. Are we good to move? We're clear! We're clear! We're clear! Come on.
Let me get my shoes.
I got you, sir. I got you, sir.
Let me get my shoes.
Hold that in your head. It's bloody.
So we got to move to the car.
On this episode, we'll hear about the investigation into what happened and what this changes for this November's election. Our US correspondent is James Matthews, and our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, joins me too. So, James, let's start with you. As you saw those images unfold in the United States, catch us up on where exactly the investigation's at right now.
The investigation, Saima, is how could this have happened? An investigation the FBI and Secret Service say will take months. The question is, how could somebody armed with a semi-automatic weapon get that close to Donald Trump in that set of circumstances? These occasions, they happen regularly. And the routine for security is that there is an advanced security team that goes and recces the location. Now, the Butler Farm Showgrounds, it's a flat area. It is used in that corner of Pennsylvania for a variety of events, but it's flat. They would have been looking for elevated positions that anybody with a weapon might themselves have scoped out. So they would surely have been looking at buildings close to that stage, and close for a rifle or a sniper with that kind of firearm is, you're talking about 200-300 yards. This individual was something like 150 yards away. So why was that building not designated as a potential danger? Why was the shooter not spotted? And why were eyewitnesses apparently ignored when they told law enforcement officers that he was there on the roof and armed? The whole situation screamed danger, and there are serious questions to be answered about why that individual, Thomas Matthew Crooks, was able to get into that position and to fire off rounds that killed one individual, critically injured two others, and of course almost killed Donald Trump.
And while those questions have to be answered, Dominic, it is such a significant moment in this election campaign and in US political history.
Yeah, it's on the eve of the Republican National Convention, where Donald Trump will be appointed as the candidate, and we're a few months away from the election. And I think the way some of the coverage has looked at this is as if we don't have much political violence in America, and political violence in America is as old as the democracy itself. And for that reason, the security around presidents, former presidents, vice presidents, even Congress men and women is incredibly tight. And the Secret Service is incredibly effective at guaranteeing the security and safety of its charges. And somehow this happened. And that, as James was saying there, it is extraordinary that this was able to happen. Some very serious questions will need to be answered. And I think on the right of American politics, there'll be a lot of conspiracy theories about how this was allowed to happen and how their man, Donald Trump, came so close to being assassinated.
Yeah, we're going to explore all of that for our listeners. And I want to come back, James, to the fact that, as Dominic says, look, there's always security at these kind of rallies. And in particular, as a former president, Donald Trump will have a Secret Service security detail, a specialist one, the kind of recce's that have to be done. Do you think, obviously there are questions to be answered, as we've said, but also what happens now in terms of his security? Because he's going to want to get back out there, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a man fighting an election campaign. Security will be tighter. I mean, all sorts of questions about not just these kind of events, the open air events, but everywhere that Donald Trump goes every time. The Republican National Convention, apart from anything else, that's the immediate engagement on his diary. And that we'll see how the circumstances of that change. According to the Republican Party, it will go ahead as planned, but Donald Trump was due to be there for 4 days. So there is important political business to be done. The context in which he does it from a security point of view, of course, will have to be reviewed. But security, is extremely tight around him. That's why it makes it so baffling that this was able to happen. I was in Washington, D.C. A couple of weeks ago. Trump was in town. He was in a convoy, and myself and our cameraman were trying to get some shots of this convoy. It got stuck in traffic. So you had this convoy of something like half a dozen vehicles. Trump himself was in one of them, weighted down, bulletproof glass and so on. They got stuck in traffic, and that meant that we were able to get within actually a few feet of Trump, just trying to get a shot of him with a camera in the back of the vehicle. What the security did at that point, bearing in mind there were a few vehicles, you've got Trump's vehicle that we were filming, the one behind it spotted us, was clearly assessing what we were up to, but it veered away from the convoy and was, for a period, was driving straight towards us. It was clearly, had we had malevolent intent, that vehicle, I've no doubt, would have taken us out. Obviously assessed that we were journalists who pose no harm, but that's how they operate. There's no, much of the time, there are no questions asked. The priority is safety, safety, safety. That's why there are serious questions to be answered. And, one of the, as part of the inquiry, they will be looking at the bullets, where they went, where they were fired from, why and how Donald Trump managed to survive that. He was on stage, he turned his head. We see from the pictures just before that initial bullet was fired. It may be that turn of the head was what saved him. There was certainly, the operation that immediately followed, that immediately kicked in, helped him. And it may be that he saved himself by getting down low. And subsequently, of course, the Secret Service swarming him and protecting him with themselves, which is what they are trained to do.
And also, I guess, what feeds into this, James, is the motive of the shooter. And that will feed into how Donald Trump proceeds with this election campaign, where he's allowed to go, what kind of security he gets. What more can you tell us, and what do we know now?
We know relatively little about the shooter at this stage. We know he was 20 years old, Thomas Matthew Crooks. A look at public records appears to indicate that he was a registered Republican. He appears to have graduated in 2022 from the Bethel Park High School. That's home to, that educates around 1,400 students. According to the Tribune Review in Western Pennsylvania, he received a $500 Star Award in his graduation year for a national maths and science initiative. There will, of course, as part of the investigation, be a look into those who know him, those who knew him, his social media presence, whether or not there was any kind of manifesto that was left behind, any clue, first-hand clue that as to what was behind this.
President Biden, Dominic, coming out pretty sharpish to say, political violence unacceptable, suspending his campaign.
Yeah, and I'm referring to Donald Trump as Donald, so unusually sort of personal and friendly. And I think what President Biden has said has been sort of echoed around the world, really. We've heard similar sentiments expressed by David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, that he condemned the violence and said there's no place for violence in any society, and sent his prayers and thoughts to the families of the victims. And we've heard from all the world leaders you'd expect to express outrage, horror, condemnation, and deep concern about this. And what's interesting is they're sort of drawing parallels, some of them at least, with the kind of increase of political violence in their own countries. Because, what politician in the world is not worried about the increasing amount of threats to their own security, whether that's come from greater polarisation or just the state of world politics or social media, who knows? But certainly, there's a concern there, I think, across the globe.
Yeah, and also in terms of violence on the ground, potential reactions, that photo, I think it's fair to say it will eventually become iconic. It's already been beamed around the world. It's famous now. He's seen with his fist in the air, his ear bleeding, and he's mouthing, James, what looks like to me, fight, fight, fight. That's what Republicans want. They want a strong, masculine figure. But the concern, of course, is the reaction from people on the ground in the US.
An iconic image. And, who's to say what he meant by fight, fight, fight? He's clearly a man with an election campaign to fight. But, it's fair to note that Donald Trump has been accused, certainly by his opponents, of fueling the kind of political division we see in this country. In terms of immediate reaction, J.D. Vance, the man who he may anoint as his vice presidential pick, he, in reaction to events in Pennsylvania, he said this: the central premise of the Biden campaign is that President Donald Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all costs. He said that rhetoric led directly to President Trump's attempted assassination. So, you have the Trump camp pointing the finger at his political opponents, and I saw that echoed in the wake of the attack elsewhere. There was a couple of elected representatives, one of them House member Mike Collins. He actually deleted this tweet, but he wrote that President Biden had, quote, sent the orders for the shooting, and he referenced a statement Biden had made about the TV debate, and Biden, in his despair about the debate, his performance, he said, "It's time to put Trump in a bullseye." That has been clearly interpreted by some Republicans, certainly this House member, although he deleted the tweet, interpreted as an instruction to up the ante to a dangerous extent. It is a sobering moment for America and American politics. Perhaps it falls to Biden and Trump together to lay down a path towards a more accommodating politics, but it's a tough challenge.
On the drive in to come here, somebody from the Republicans Abroad organisation in the UK was saying even more kind of controversial statements, saying that the Democrats had failed to take out Donald Trump using lawfare and other nefarious means, and therefore this had happened, and was, when pressed upon it, backpedaled a bit, but not much. So on the one hand, supporters of Donald Trump are saying this is really the fault and can be blamed on the polarisation that the other side are doing, while doing nothing at all to be conciliatory in the way they're reacting to this event.
Yeah, this is it, isn't it? Whether the temperature is being brought down or whether this is seen as an incitement as well. We've had in American history, I mean, we can go way back as well, of course. So 1981 was the last time we had political violence of this level. It was Ronald Reagan, John Hinckley Jr., Kennedy assassinations, infamous in the 60s. And do we think we've got this new phase? We had January 6th and then today, all surrounded around Trump.
Yeah, but what's interesting about this, and also parallels with Reagan, is how this will affect the minds of voters, but also how will it affect the mind of Donald Trump, I think. And those two questions are crucial, I think, to how this will play out in terms of its political ramifications in this election. His supporters will say, here's a strong man who didn't flinch, who showed the true mettle of his character under attack, and he's the kind of guy you want leading America in this very dangerous world. And also evangelical Christians who believe he's sent by God. Some have told me, I think we'll see it sort of divine ordination or divine intervention that saved his life, when it's just as he turned at that crucial moment. I think what's more interesting is what's it doing to the minds of those swing voters in those swing states. And I think there's been a lot of fear about Donald Trump. And what he's been very effective at in this campaign is actually not reminding voters, but being fairly disciplined, maintaining his composure, not reminding them of the craziness of the first campaign, and the shenanigans and the fears of America tipping into violence in the first term in office, and obviously that greatest act of political violence in recent memory, the assault on the Capitol, that many Americans do blame on Donald Trump, even though supporters say that's nonsense. So will they look at this, even though he was the victim of this political violence, will they look at it as a reminder of the fears they had about Donald Trump back in the days of when he was president, and might it put them off, those more cautious, as I say, undecided voters? If you look at other leaders who've survived assassinations, their biographies often say that they changed quite a lot in response to it. And also, he has maintained his composure. He could be affected by this emotionally, but also just in simple terms of campaigning, as James was saying, the lifeblood of Donald Trump's political way of operating are these rallies, attracting tens of thousands of people. Is he going to shrink from that? His supporters say they don't think so. But who knows what will happen in the mind of a man who's very nearly, literally, a whisker away from being assassinated.
And James, it is how Donald Trump chooses to, utilise this moment in his campaign, and how he comes out and responds, and what he says, particularly as we've got the convention this week.
Important what Donald Trump says, but important how it's handled by Joe Biden and the Democrats, who have put Donald Trump front and centre of their campaigning, characterising him as the man who is the existential threat to American democracy. And the Democrats, they will want to orientate the electorate at large back onto these dangers, to remind voters about Donald Trump and his part in ramping up political division and his part in making politics as partisan as they are right now. We see reminders on social media and elsewhere about the brutal assault on the husband of the former Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Trump was downplayed that. He also downplayed the kidnap plot against the Democrat Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. So that's where Democrats want to take the audience. Difficult for them to play that game right now in the wake of what's happened. It's a challenge, unquestionably, for Biden to play the straight man in all of this, to chart a course that characterises him, that styles him as the statesman who eschews political violence, who has not driven political division, and who would say that is the fault of his opponent and others. Difficult in the circumstances where Donald Trump has been shot, and in a set of circumstances that evokes sympathy and support for him.
James, thanks so much for all your insight. I'm going to let you go. Thank you. Dominic, again, that thought about the polarisation of American politics, surely this will only serve to create further divisions now.
I think it depends on how it's handled by both sides. And, I think it could be the moment that America pulls back from the brink a bit. We have heard some pretty uncompromising language on Sky and other outlets, and also in America, from Republicans, almost blaming the other side, saying, as I was saying earlier, that this was planned by the other side, really jumping the gun there and being very aggressive in response to it. And I think it will be crucial to see how Donald Trump responds as well, and what this will do to his psyche. He is somebody who has peddled and pushed conspiracy theories. He's also somebody who has a deep suspicion of the deep state, and has threatened openly retribution when he is re-elected. So will he now openly demand retribution and revenge from the deep state? Will he openly wonder how this happened? I mean, how is he the first president who's come very close to being assassinated since the early 80s, at a time when the Secret Service has this so controlled? If he kind of grinds the axe, as it were, and makes the most of that, then he could absolutely polarise things. But, interestingly, what he said on Truth Social, the sort of Trump social media outlet, so far has been pretty conciliatory and more in line with sort of the newer, as we were saying, more composed, more disciplined Trump that we've got used to in this election campaign.
And in fact, we had that pretty prompt statement from him on Truth Social after the attack, talking about, there was much blood and I've been hit in my ear. And we've just had a statement as well coming in on Truth Social. Dominic, he says, "We will fear not, but remain resilient in faith."
Interestingly, there are just "fear not" are the only two words in capitals. We're used to Trump of old would have, I think, put it all in capitals with exclamation marks and would have gone right after his opponents and accused them, I think, and would have been very angry. He's calling on people to be more restrained and saying they should be grateful that the unthinkable didn't happen. And as you say, talking about faith. Defiance as well, but it is a very sort of Christian message. And I think many Americans will be relieved that he's not going in the other direction. This is not angry Trump. But also I think he's a good politician. He knows that the whole logic behind this campaign is not to remind people of the chaos, of the rancour of the first campaign and the first 4 years in office, because he's got to convince those swing voters who didn't vote for him last time that they should swing around him now. And anything that reminds them of those crazy days in the past may well put them off. So he's a good politician. It's in line with his election campaign. I think many people will be relieved in America that so far he's not responded angrily to this attempt on his life.
And of course, looking at these images, is this it? Has Donald Trump won the US presidential election way before he's even been named, as the nominee?
Particularly as it comes off the back of a disastrous week for his rival, Joe Biden, talking to President Zelensky and calling him President Putin and talking about Vice President Trump when he's going to be talking about Kamala Harris. So off the back of that, you can understand why a lot of people are saying he's won. It's a done deal. And that's, I think, a lot off the back of that photo of him clenching his fist, which he stayed on the stage until the cameras had a clear shot of him before he then left.
It's funny you mentioned that. And his security detail were desperately trying to get him into the car, and he was utilising that moment.
His supporters would say that's because he wanted his people to know he was okay. That connection, he has visceral connection with his own people. Others will say, no, he was endangering his bodyguards because he wanted to get that photo. I mean, in the heat of the moment, who knows what was going through his mind? But that picture is crucial. And it's also, in the American psyche, it's not so much how you're knocked down, it's how you get up in all sorts of situations. You're judged on your ability to get up, get back on the horse, get back into business after you're being bankrupt or whatever. So his recovery from that, I think, will stand him in very good stead. And I think that there will be many who will say, yes, he's won now. He's appeared stronger than his weak and apparently more infirm rival. I think the other important point to end on is that this is all very important for up to the election as well, but I think also afterwards. Because, Americans are deeply concerned about what could come after the election. They know that their capital was attacked and ransacked on January the 6th. They are deeply afraid of some kind of civil war, some kind of insurgency, some kind of violence. So whoever wins in November, this is a very unsettling backdrop to whatever that leads to. So I think that only accentuates the fears of civil unrest after November, whatever happens, whoever wins.
So many more questions to be answered, but some fantastic analysis from you both, James and Dominic. Thank you. And for more from James and Dominic, you can read their analysis on the Sky News app. And the Daily, of course, with Neil, will cover the Republican National Convention through this week, and any developments we'll be bringing you them too. I'm Saima Mohsin. Thanks for listening.